Hello guys, my name is Trevor Barnes, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a fairly good performing budget gaming computer for very little money. Now I got some parts all around me which we're going to be talking about in a second, but there's a couple things I want to talk about before we get started. So number one, when it comes to this type of stuff, your mileage may vary. The parts that I have around here are going to be a mix of used and new parts. The reason being is because some things I feel like you should always buy new, no doubt about it, and other things to make this into a real good budget gaming computer need to be bought used. You can buy fully new if you're more comfortable with that, and I do technically recommend that for a quality sake, however not always a good value sake. Regardless, all the links will be down in the description, both for the used parts that I recommend and also new, so no matter how you want to purchase these items, you'll be able to find them in the description below. All said and done, this computer will be just under $300. Might be able to be quite a bit underneath that depending on exactly what you need and what you may already have, but let's just get started. So the first thing you won't see here is a case. That's definitely done on purpose right now, and it's because our budget didn't really have one. Though I do have one linked in the description that does bring you to just around $310, so you'll have to live with the $10 overage if that really matters to you. You can find cases cheaper. I just picked a fairly basic $30 case. And also you can look at the used market. You can go to places even like Goodwill, find an old computer, and there's your case. But if you have a shoebox or just something, or you can lay this on a desk or whatever, hey, we'll worry about the case another time. If you have a budget that's strictly under $300, that's the least of your worries. So let's go into some of our hardware selection here. I'm rocking the AMD FX 4130 in this build. You can get that processor from anywhere between $20 to $30 on eBay, and that's kind of what I recommend you do. Now I will state right off the bat that is going to be a little bit of a bottleneck for our overall system, only about a 10 to 15% bottleneck. It's not terrible. However, if you do have a little bit higher of a budget and don't mind spending like $50, $60, I do recommend you go ahead and upgrade that CPU a little bit to something a little bit more performance, a little more cores, like their 6-core variety FX series CPUs if you want to stay with AMD. You could go Intel. The reason I chose AMD in this is just for value. I think for what you get for like a $20 CPU, it's not bad. And also your upgradability on this type of platform is more than some of those Xeons you get out there. You can get a $20 or $30 like Intel server grade hardware that performs better than this. However, the upgrade path for it's not so good. With this, it's just AMD's AM3 platform, so you can go ahead and put a beast of an AM3 processor in here, and you're good to go. I think it's a better overall upgrade path. So for the motherboard, I'm rocking an ASUS motherboard. Full information will be linked down below, but it is the M5A78L. This is a perfectly decent micro ATX board. You've got 2 RAM slots, you got a lot of SATA ports if that's something that matters to you. You got, VGA built in. We're not going to utilize that in this build, so who really cares? However, it does come with a little speaker, a BIOS speaker, if you care about that. Now, I do think you should be looking for a motherboard used just because, again, for the value and what you can get. With that being said, ASUS, Gigabyte, whatever other companies you can find for a somewhat affordable, cheap motherboard that supports this platform, I do recommend. I would make sure it is AM3 Plus, so that way you can support all the range of those generation processors. Besides that, just go ahead and look online for reviews. You do want to find something that can support a decent overclock. This motherboard doesn't do the best at that. However, we'll get into that a little bit when we talk about performance later. For RAM, I recommend you just go pick up a kit of 8GB RAM. The cheapest you can find, the better if you ask me. It is one of those things that I do recommend you buy on Amazon, buy new, as you're gonna get something that works. Used RAM, I've had kind of a little bit different of luck with. However, for just being a cheap build, and not that we're putting super expensive hardware in this, I do recommend checking out, used RAM. Sometimes you can get it for a very good price on eBay for like 30 bucks for 8 gigs. This is where too, if you have some RAM at home already off of an old machine, I would stick it in here and try to save as much money on those type of things as you can, as RAM still is very expensive, even for DDR3. So for storage, I feel like we're doing really well actually. I have a Kingston 128GB SSD. A lot of budget builds don't have SSDs, and I think that's a big mistake, especially when you can pick this thing up for right now on Amazon brand new for $21.99. I've never seen SSDs for that type of price, and it's decent brand, Kingston, so you're not getting some Chinese knockoff. What's crazy about that is Chinese knockoffs are actually more expensive than this thing is right now. So I totally recommend this SSD. I've been using this for a little while now. I haven't had any issues with it. So we're gonna stick that in there. And also we have a 2 terabyte mechanical hard drive. Now for this budget, I can't necessarily say you can get a 2 terabyte hard drive. In the budget, I did put a 1 terabyte Barracuda drive. However, I do recommend getting that new. Same with the SSD. You can get them used, but I don't really recommend that. You know, used drives don't normally work good in my opinion. But this is where if you don't need that hard drive, or maybe you have a hard drive laying around already you can put in the machine, you can save a considerable amount of money considering that 1 terabyte drive is like $45. So if you don't need to spend that money, this is like a $250 machine, and we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet, or you can get an enhancement, which we're gonna talk about right now. So for CPU coolers, of course, you might have your stock heatsink, and if you are buying used, make sure your CPU comes with this, or you're gonna have to buy one of these. This is the stock AMD heatsink that came with my processor. There's something inherently wrong with this, but these FX processors run very hot. So what I have on here is the Corsair H60. It's one of those AIO enclosed water cooling units. This is a very good unit for the price. It goes for around $50 to $60 depending on where you can pick it up and what sales are going on. So if you can go ahead and don't need to get that hard drive, I would get this thing. This thing is great. It keeps our temperatures very nice and cool, which will also allow us to obtain a good overclock, because if you're gonna keep the stock cooler, overclocking or the lack of overclocking with this is really going to hinder our performance, especially when we get to this guy right here, where we will start seeing bottlenecking issues. But for our GPU, I've chosen the GeForce GTX 670. Now, this is a fairly old graphics card at this point, but let me explain my choice here. This was a fairly high performance graphics card back in its day. What's really nice about it is you can find them very inexpensively. On eBay, going anywhere for between $70 to $100. If you can pick one of these things up for $70, I think you got yourself a bargain. Though it might be old, performance-wise, it kind of falls in the middle between a GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti, meaning it's just a little bit higher performance than a 1050, but just a little bit under performance compared to a 1050 Ti. But considering the price range, and especially with graphics card pricing still a little high, is come down quite a bit. But you definitely can't find a 1050 for that price range, let alone a 1050 Ti. This card will produce more heat, it is bigger, it is going to use more power, but if you just care about performance for the price, I feel like this is a really good model. If you want an alternative card for this, you could also get the 760. In my opinion, it only is about a 5% difference in this card, so within the margin of error, that would be probably more equivalent to the 1050, and that will work as well. Those go for around $100 if you can't find the 670. But this is what I found, and this is where I just say do your research and find equivalents if you can't find the exact model. But this card will work for us and will give us fairly good performance. And then for our power supply, I have the EVGA 500B. This is an 80 plus bronze certified power supply. Pick these up for like 30 bucks. One of my favorite power supplies for the price. So go ahead and buy this new as well. I do recommend power supplies. You always buy new because you don't want someone else's junk when it comes to powering your machine. So there we go. There is everything right there. Let's get assembling. We don't have that much to do here, all things considered. I do have a power button off an old computer case so we can power this thing without having to trip it. So we already have the RAM in. Let's go ahead and put this little connector in for the fan for the cooler, and let's just stick this somewhere. Okay, I guess it's going there. Doesn't have a choice, the wire's kind of short. Put our graphics card in. Now, of course, in all reality, I do recommend you get a case, because this is a little jank, to say the least, but, you know, it's gonna work for us testing this out and seeing how it performs. Plug our SATA cables in. Okay, and we'll just plug our power supply in here. Now, of course, if you can find one for the price that's any good, I do always recommend module power supplies. It's a lot better than this spaghetti mess of cables. One last thing to note, if you're looking at other parts, maybe other power supplies, into what I'm just directly recommending in this build, make sure your power supply has the right connectors out of the box for your graphics card. Because like this is 2 3-pin connectors, something like, I know the 760 for example, most of those units have like a 2 4-pin connectors. This power supply has the adapter for it, but some don't. I had another power supply that only had 2 3-pins and not a 4-pin, so just make sure that everything is going to work the way you want it to, otherwise you might have to get adapters or whatever the case may be. Okay, cool. I think we are all set up here with everything ready to go. I'm gonna try to get my power button over here, and let's go ahead and hook up a monitor. Okay, so we're almost ready to turn this on. The only other thing I'm gonna plug in is some of my accessories here. Now, these things you can find at the bargain bin of a Goodwill or something. An old Wi-Fi USB card. It is not latest Wi-Fi technology. This is I believe just a N, maybe it is an N card. I don't know. At worst case scenario, this is a wireless G card. It's USB, it's not gonna be super fast. But for us, it works considering it was like $1. Doesn't really add to our overall budget. I have a Bluetooth card here, a little USB dongle from Best Buy. This was like $20. However, you can pick these on Amazon for just like $3, $4. So if you want to add Bluetooth to your build, there you go. And for a gaming computer, that could be useful for like a controller or something. And then I have my mouse and keyboard. I'm not going to really include that, but I'm plugging that dongle in as well. Also, ignore this weird monitor over here. That's for a future project you'll see. Okay, I got my mouse and keyboard. I'm recording on this camera so you guys can see the screen. And here we go. I'm going to click the button in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Don't catch on fire. So one thing to note, this is kind of obvious, but maybe I'm stupid. Make sure your graphics card is sitting all the way in the motherboard. Because I don't have this in a case and it's just being suspended on the desk, I had to put something under the motherboard to kind of support it a little bit better. So there we go. See both of our hard drives, so that's great. We'll go to system information just so you can see my full specs here. I have the 4130, like I said, and I do have 10 gigabytes of RAM in here. Unfortunately, not dual channel or anything. I do recommend that. That's why I think you should pick up a kit of 8 gigs of RAM, 2 4-gig chips, and you'll be done with that. 8 gigs is still plenty enough for gaming right now. But when we go to jumper-free configuration, we're going to see my overclock. So I have this clocked at 4.6 gigahertz. I've got a stable overclock at that. I almost have a stable overclock at 4.7. However, this CPU should be able to have a 5 gigahertz overclock without any issues at all. Even the issues I'm having right now are not heat related at all. I'm staying at very nice temperatures with the water cooling loop. It's just this motherboard doesn't support a good overclock. So that's one thing, again, I recommend you watch out for before you buy. Because I'm also not thrilled about my voltages here. I feel like I'm a little high, but you know, it is what it is. It's a budget computer. If I break the processor, not happy about it, but oh well. But 4.6 gigahertz is still a very big increase from the original 3.8 gigahertz. So we'll go ahead and exit and save here. We'll boot up into Windows and let's see some performance. Cool, so we are in Windows right now. Let's first go ahead and bring up our temperatures here so we can go ahead and take a look at those. So hopefully you can see this, but the CPU is sitting at a nice like 25 degrees Celsius right now, and we got a little bit of load on the computer as everything's still loading up. This idles anywhere between 10 Celsius to 0. I'm very, very happy with the water cooling loop, especially for this processor where this guy right here idled at like 45, 50 degrees Celsius. So we're a huge improvement now. Essentially our idle temps before are now our load temps, which we're gonna see as we try Cinebench R15 right here, and we can see how we're doing CPU-wise. So we will keep our temps up here while we do the CPU test so we can take a look at them. So we can see all cores at 4.6 gigahertz. Right now we're at a 33 degrees Celsius, really doing well here. I can definitely start feeling the heat coming off the radiator a little bit, but yeah, we're well within good temps here, and this is where it goes pretty much. Like mid-30s. I think the highest I've seen temp-wise is like 40 degrees Celsius with this water block, which is why I do recommend it. This is where you're going to struggle, especially with any overclocking. Okay, so with that benchmark over, the hottest we got was 40 degrees Celsius, pretty much right what I said. And when we take a look here, we got a 343, which is great for this processor, considering that stock without any overclock, it's like 240 something is its score. So we did fantastic there. You can see the best score I got is 247 at 4.6. At 4.7, I got 254. But this is my point. If you can go ahead and overclock this more to like 5 gigahertz, if you have a motherboard that can really handle that, you can get some even more performance out of this that I think is going to satisfy you. And like I was mentioning about bottlenecks earlier, this is one thing that you should be aware of. With this specific CPU, it will be about a 10% bottleneck to this GPU. If you get a little bit better of a processor or can try to push more of an overclock, that may be fixed immediately. For example, I will say out of the box, when I did a OpenGL test without overclocking, I was getting like 45 frames a second. Definitely not good. You'll see we'll be doing much better here. And how did we do? We are getting 67. I've gotten like 70 be my best result. Actually, my best result here was 71.80, so definitely not bad at all. This card should be getting around 80, so maybe we're losing about 10 frames because of that bottleneck. But with that being said, it's nothing too extreme, and you'll still be able to play most games without too much of an issue on medium to high settings. So we talked about gaming, but let's actually game now and get into some actual games and see what the performance actually looks like. Okay, so the first game we're going to go ahead and try to play is Grand Theft Auto 5. We're going to go to settings first. I want to show you the graphical settings we got. So our biggest limitation here is going to be the RAM that's on the card. Unfortunately, it's not like we have a card that's got over 2 gigs, but we got full 1080p. We got FXAA on. Oh, by the way, we're at a 60 hertz refresh rate. MSAA off. VSync is on. Texture quality high. Shader quality very high, high, high. Reflection MSAA X8, water quality very high, very high, very high, softest, high, X16, high, very high. So we're pretty much at high to very high settings, and we're just gonna go here and run the benchmark test. You see in the top left corner that we're rocking 60 frames already because of VSync, but we'll go ahead and run benchmark tests. I think for the most part throughout this entire test, what we're really gonna see is that we're getting 30 frames or above, and normally closer to 50, 60. So we're pretty close to 60 there in all those shots. I'm really curious to see when action starts playing, when we see the action. Shooting, car racing, things like that. So we're pretty 60 frames a second, roughly. Dips down the 40s there. Okay, got some more action here. I want to just make sure we stay above 30 frames a second, because what we could always do too, if we're not really happy with these frame rates, we could definitely drop the resolution down to 720, and I think we'll have very respectable frame rates, or even bring some of the quality down. If we're running all medium settings, for example, we'll be probably in the 60s, you know, all day. So that was a pretty good run. Again, I'm very happy with the frame rates here. We do have some screen tearing at times. That's mostly because this monitor sucks. Would the Hummer really be able to push the dump truck out of the way like that? But even this action at just over 30 frames a second, would I prefer it be higher? Yes, but we're talking so little amount of money here, and we are playing at pretty much high to very high settings. You turn some of that down, you'll get that frame rate right up. I am very satisfied with this personally, especially when we compare it to like the consoles. So I'm all ready to play with my trackball mouse. That's how you play Counter-Strike. Let's go ahead and take a look at the settings first here. So 1080p. So this is just putting everything at auto high. So let's just leave it all there. So of course, some games are going to demand more CPU power when other games demand more GPU power. I actually don't know what Counter-Strike prefers. I don't know if it's a GPU-intensive game or a CPU-intensive game, but you're gonna have a bottleneck in more of the CPU-intensive games. So if this maxes out our CPU, it's going to be affecting and giving that bottleneck to our GPU. Regardless, I still expect a solid 60 frames a second on a game like this. And yep, that's pretty accurate. We're getting roughly almost 100 frames. Let's do some benchmarking here. We'll try to play. Trevor will try not to die, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at our frame rates. I am not a good gamer. I'm just going to tell you that ahead of time here. And I died. Wow, I couldn't even shoot the gun once before I died. And I died. So let's go ahead and quit this. This is obviously gonna play perfectly fine without any issues, so not really worried about that. So look, we could go ahead and test more games, but there's no need to. The bottom line is this machine will play pretty much anything you want to at medium to high settings. Even with its bottleneck CPU, which could definitely use an upgrade, this will do it. On more CPU-based games, you might have to bring your settings down to low, but on games that pretty much utilize GPU, prioritizing that a little bit more, this will be a very solid gaming machine for you. And like I said, the upgrade path is really easy for this, because you could build this for that $250 price range, add $50 for the hard drive if you need that, and you got yourself a decent computer right now. However, couple months go down, year goes down the road, this is struggling, you can put a beast of an 8-core, CPU in this that will play every modern title without any issues at all. I'm not saying this is necessarily the most cost-effective way of doing things. I'm not saying this is the most realistic way to do it without a case by any means. I'm not saying this is your most bang for your buck performance, but what I am saying, I do believe this is one of the most easily upgraded platforms that you can get for the price, where you're getting some hardware now for you to play the games you may want to play, but then down the road be able to upgrade into a fairly good gaming machine. So with all that being said, I actually got quite a few plans for this system, including kind of the little weird rigged monitor you see over here. You'll see in an upcoming video. But if you want to stay tuned and see all that, make sure you subscribe, you like, and you comment, and let me know if you guys want to see me do anything else with this hardware or test anything else out. I do know a couple upgrades right off the top of my head that are going to happen in the next few weeks. Is definitely upgrading that CPU to see what extra performance we can really get out of this rig, and really, really, really tax this GeForce GTX 670 to the max to see how it compares to modern day cards. But with all that being said, hope you guys enjoy this budget series, and until next time, see you later.